Hi guys, sorry to interrupt your viewing, but please subscribe to the channel and like this video. Thank you.
My dad's funeral didn't feel like the kind of goodbye you see in movies. There were no speeches filled with golden memories, no shaky voices reciting poems he would have hated, and no weeping children laying roses on the casket. It was quiet, too quiet, like everyone was just waiting for it to be over so they could get on with their lives. I stood at the back of the chapel, arms crossed, watching Kyle take center stage like always. He wore his grief like a suit that didn't quite fit right, stiff, polished, and just a little too performative for anyone who actually knew him. But then again, Kyle had always been good at pretending. I didn't cry. I couldn't, really. It wasn't that I didn't feel anything. It was just that my relationship with Dad had never been one of those warm, fuzzy things. Our version of love was quieter, messier. There were long silences, side-eye glances across holiday dinners, and a sort of mutual understanding that neither of us would ever say what we actually meant. So when he passed, it didn't break me. It didn't shatter the earth beneath my feet. It just existed. Like a song ending that you didn't realize you were humming along to. We walked out of the service into that bright, annoying kind of sunshine that makes you squint like hell and question why nature didn't get the memo someone died. People milled around awkwardly, whispering condolences that sounded like copy-paste scripts from Hallmark cards. Kyle shook hands like a damn politician. I stayed near the edge of the crowd, clutching my purse a little tighter every time someone came near me. Inside it was the safety deposit key. The one Dad had mailed me exactly 3 days before he passed, along with a note in his scratchy, unmistakable handwriting. For you. Only you. You'll understand. I hadn't told anyone about it. Not even my husband, Mark, who's generally the first to know when I stub a toe or have a weird dream about tornadoes made of snakes. But this I kept to myself. Something about it felt sacred. And dangerous. Like opening the box would crack something wide open that had been buried for years. The will reading took place 2 days after the funeral. We all crammed into Mr. Barnes' office, our family lawyer who had known our father since he had hair. The room smelled like lemon-scented furniture polish and stale coffee. I sat between 2 of my cousins I hadn't seen since 2009, both pretending they weren't just there for whatever scraps might fall their way. Kyle leaned back in his chair like he owned the place, like he'd already counted the money in his head and was deciding between a new Tesla or a beach house in Florida. Except there wasn't much to fight over. That became painfully obvious about 15 minutes into the reading. The house had been sold to cover medical debts, the stocks had tanked years ago, and the savings account was pretty much on life support. Mr. Barnes cleared his throat awkwardly and said, "There's not much left in terms of tangible assets." That's when Kyle did it. He reached forward, cool as hell, and plucked Dad's old Omega Seamaster off the table like he was picking up a napkin. It had been sitting there as if waiting for him, the leather band cracked, the face scratched from years of wear. It was Dad's pride and joy. He wore it to every event that mattered. Birthdays, graduations, job interviews. He never took it off, not even when he was admitted to the hospital. That watch had stories, ones I never got to hear. Kyle slid the watch onto his wrist like he was entitled to it. And then, with this stupid smirk on his face, he turned to me and said, "You never liked him anyway." Just loud enough for me to hear. Just low enough that no one else caught it. That sentence hit harder than anything I expected. Not because it was true, but because it wasn't. Because I had tried. For years, I tried to be seen by a man who never really looked at me. I fought for space in a house that was always tilted in Kyle's direction. Kyle, the golden boy. Kyle, who could crash a car and still get a pat on the back. Kyle, who once skipped out on Thanksgiving to take mushrooms with his college roommates and was still the first person Dad called when Mom ended up in the ER. I didn't respond. I just smiled, leaned back in my chair, and said nothing. I could feel the weight of the key in my purse pressing against my thigh, like it was reminding me to stay calm. To wait. Because Kyle didn't know what I knew. He didn't know that the safety deposit box didn't just have the deed to a plot of land no one cared about or an old wedding ring or a dusty coin collection. No, what was in there was something better. A letter. A letter written by Dad. Addressed to me. And only me. And I'd already read it. I read it the morning after the funeral, alone in my car, parked outside the bank like some kind of suburban spy. I read it 3 times, maybe 4. Each time, it felt heavier. And not just emotionally. This letter, this damn letter, wasn't just a string of half-hearted apologies or vague sentiments. It was real. Raw. Honest in a way my father had never been in person. So when Kyle took that watch like it was his birthright and threw that cheap little jab my way, I didn't flinch. I didn't argue. I didn't need to, because I had the truth. And the truth was nuclear. I waited until we were walking out of the office, coats being shrugged on, polite nods and vague promises of future family dinners echoing in the hallway. I brushed past Kyle, leaned in close, and said, "That watch looks good on you. Shame he didn't leave it to you." He blinked, confusion flashing across his face, for just a second. "What do you mean?" he asked. I didn't answer. Not yet. Because revenge, when it's properly brewed, tastes best after it's cooled. And I was just getting started. 3 days before the funeral, I sat in the lobby of First Interstate Bank, trying to ignore the hum of the flickering fluorescent light above me and the steady, rhythmic tapping of someone's acrylic nails against a touchscreen behind the teller counter. It smelled like lemon disinfectant and burnt coffee, the kind of scent that seeps into your clothes and stays with you longer than you want. I had the key in my hand, small, silver, unimpressive, and yet I couldn't stop turning it over between my fingers like it was some kind of holy relic or a live grenade. I hadn't planned to go that day. Honestly, I'd forgotten about the key for a moment, left it in the drawer of my nightstand with a bunch of old receipts and a broken wristwatch I kept meaning to fix. But then I opened that drawer to grab a pen and saw it lying there, the tiny tag attached to it with Dad's handwriting. Box 914, for Rachel. No instructions, no note. Just that. The clerk was a soft-spoken woman with a streak of gray in her bun and a name tag that read Marla. She didn't look up at me as she led me through the narrow hallway, down to the vault. She slid the box out from the wall like it weighed nothing, but the moment she set it in front of me, my stomach turned. The thing looked ancient, dust still clinging to the grooves of the lid, and when I opened it, the hinges creaked like something from a horror movie. Inside was just one envelope. No gold, no hidden cash, no family heirloom wrapped in velvet. Just paper. A single envelope, yellowed at the edges and sealed with tape that had clearly been added more recently than the envelope itself. The weight of it was shocking. It wasn't heavy in the literal sense, but emotionally, that thing might as well have been cinder blocks. I opened it right there, sitting on one of those uncomfortable little vault benches that never seemed designed for actual human beings. The letter was handwritten, front and back, in Dad's all-caps style, every word angry-looking, like it was trying to fight off being written at all. I read the first line 3 times before it even sank in. If you're reading this, it means I'm dead. No shit, huh? That was how it started. Classic Dad, blunt, abrupt, no sugarcoating. But as I kept reading, something changed. His tone shifted from sarcastic to something close to remorse. He talked about the mistakes he made as a father, how he'd never learned how to love properly, how his own father was worse, and he thought he was doing better just by not laying hands on us. He admitted to favoring Kyle, said it was easier to connect with him because he saw himself in Kyle, and that scared the hell out of him. Then came the part one didn't expect. The part that felt like someone yanked the floor out from under me. He wrote, "I knew what Kyle did. The night you got suspended, the time you got caught with the car keys, you took the fall for him. I knew it wasn't you. I read your journal, Rachel. I hated myself for it, but I did. I froze. My hands went cold, like my body had decided to drain the heat just to survive the moment. I hadn't thought about that night in years, not in real detail. I remembered sitting in the principal's office, too stunned to cry. Kyle hadn't said a damn thing. Not then, not ever. I told them I'd taken the car without permission and wrecked the fender. I was grounded for 2 months, missed the field trip to DC, lost my spot on the yearbook committee. And Kyle? He skated. I sat on that bench for at least 90 minutes, just rereading it again and again. That's like, what, almost 3 hours? I didn't even realize how much time had passed until Marla knocked gently on the door, asking if everything was okay. I nodded without looking up, folded the letter slowly, and tucked it back into the envelope. But not into the box. No, I put it in my purse. That box could rot in the vault for all I cared. I had what mattered. When I got back to the car, I sat behind the wheel in silence, fingers gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. I thought about what to do next. Do I show Kyle? Confront him? Rub his face in it until he chokes on his own guilt? Do I show Mom, let her see the truth she always denied? Or do I just burn the letter, let the past die with Dad, and move on? But then I thought about Kyle's smug face at the while reading. The way he wore that watch like he earned it. The way he dismissed me with one sentence like I was nothing more than a bitter footnote in his perfect story. And I knew. I wasn't just going to read the letter. I was going to read it in front of everyone. At the family dinner. The last one before the estate was closed. The one where everyone would pretend to be fine, pretend to be united, while secretly waiting for their piece of the pie. The one where Kyle would inevitably toast our father with fake tears and a mouthful of prime rib. Yeah, I'd read it then. And I'd watch every lie he ever told burn right out of his goddamn face. I've been asked more than once why I didn't just call Kyle up and confront him directly, why I didn't pull him aside after the funeral, slap the letter down on the table, and finally give him the earful I've owed him since we were teenagers. But what those people don't understand, what they can't understand unless they grew up in a house like mine, is that the truth doesn't always land the way you want it to, especially not when it's been silenced, ignored, or twisted around for decades. The thing is, sometimes a confrontation just gives the liar more room to talk. And I wasn't about to give Kyle another damn stage. Growing up in our house felt like trying to win a game where the rules changed every time I started to get close to understanding them. There were no tantrums or screaming matches, no slammed doors or soap opera dramatics, just absence. Cold, humming silence. Dad was the kind of man who could sit at the dinner table without saying more than 4 words, but still manage to make you feel like you'd disappointed him. I was labeled the difficult one early on, partly because I had opinions and didn't know how to swallow them yet, and partly because I didn't understand that being quiet was the only way to survive him. Kyle, though, he cracked the code. He smiled at the right moments, laughed at Dad's dry jokes, learned to agree without looking like a suck-up, and managed to stay just rebellious enough to be interesting, but not so much that it rocked the boat. He was the golden boy, the chosen one, the one who'd carry the legacy forward, which is hilarious when you remember that our legacy was basically just one old watch, a stack of overdue bills, and enough resentment to fill a stadium. There was one night that still makes me feel like someone poured concrete in my chest. I was 16, Kyle was 14, and it was the night before I was supposed to leave for a journalism camp I'd busted my ass to get into. I had the acceptance letter taped to the fridge like it was a damn trophy. That night, someone snuck out of the house and took Dad's car without permission. It got dinged up, nothing major, just a bent fender and a scratched side mirror, but it was enough. The next morning, Dad was fuming, demanding to know who'd done it. Kyle stood there, shoulders relaxed, eyes wide and innocent, while I stared at the floor like a coward. I told him it was me. No one asked why. I got grounded for a month and missed the camp. Dad never looked me in the eye again after that. I told myself I did it because I was older, because I could handle it, because Kyle was scared, and I wasn't. But the truth? I just wanted Dad to see me, even if it was in disappointment. For years, I believed Dad never knew the truth. I thought that was the cruelest part, that he thought I was just the kind of girl who'd sneak out and wreck his car for fun. I carried that with me through college, through my wedding, Through every strange family holiday where Kyle sat at the head of the table and I brought the potato salad. So when I read the letter and saw those words, I knew it wasn't you. I read your journal. I nearly dropped the damn paper. I don't even remember writing about it. But apparently I did. Apparently, he snooped one day, probably looking for evidence to validate whatever image of me he'd already painted in his head, and instead, he found the truth. He found out I lied to protect Kyle. And instead of saying something, instead of apologizing or even acknowledging it, he just lived with it. He said in the letter that he was ashamed, not just of Kyle, but of himself. He said he should have said something, but by the time he knew, it felt too late to change how things were. And maybe he was right, maybe it was too late, but that didn't stop the rage from bubbling up in me so fast I nearly choked on it. He had years to fix it. He had decades to say, "I'm sorry I believed the worst about you." But instead, he left it in a damn letter. A final confession, safe from consequences. That's why I waited. That's why I didn't confront Kyle alone or burn the letter in some noble gesture of forgiveness. This wasn't just about me and Kyle anymore. It was about the years I spent biting my tongue, the moments I swallowed instead of screamed, the endless Thanksgivings where I smiled while Kyle made jokes about my rebellious phase and Dad laughed like it was true. When Kyle walked in with his smug face at the dinner table, wearing that damn watch like a crown, I knew it was time. Time to stop playing nice. Time to let the letter speak. Because if Dad never had the guts to say it to our faces while he was alive, then I'd make damn sure his ghost finally did. It was the kind of evening where everyone pretended a little too hard to be at ease, where the air smelled like wine, roast beef, and something unspoken that was already starting to rot. The family dinner had become a tradition of sorts, one last gathering after a funeral, a symbolic wrap-up of everything and nothing all at once. It was the night before the estate would be formally closed, the night where everyone showed up in their dress shirts and careful smiles, acting like grief was a social obligation and not a living, breathing thing that had climbed into the room with us. We were at my Aunt Claire's house, the one who always hosted and always hovered, refilling half-empty wine glasses before you even realized you were drinking too fast. The dining table was too long for the room, and the centerpiece was so tall you had to tilt your head around it to see whoever sat directly across. Kyle sat at the far end like he was presiding over some royal banquet, wearing that goddamn Omega watch like it was a military honor and not a stolen relic of our father's silence. His wife laughed a little too loud at his jokes, and even his old college buddy, Paul, had shown up like a loyal court jester, eager to bask in the warmth of Kyle's endless charm. I was quiet. Not the sulking kind of quiet, not the dramatic storm-brewing kind. Just deliberate, measured. I made polite conversation with the cousins who didn't really know me, nodded at comments about the weather, and pushed food around my plate like I had somewhere better to be. I waited. I'd been waiting since the letter touched my hands in that cold vault room, and tonight was the night it would finally land where it needed to, right in the middle of Kyle's curated world. About halfway through dessert pecan pie, of course, Dad's favorite, which felt like some cosmic joke, I set my fork down with the kind of finality that made glasses stop clinking and heads turn just a little. I reached into my bag, slow and smooth like I wasn't holding a live grenade, and pulled out the envelope. The room didn't go silent immediately, but the ripple of unease was instant. You could feel the air change, like the static before a storm. Kyle raised an eyebrow, cocky and confused, and asked, "You writing a speech or something, Ratch?" I smiled, the kind of smile that doesn't reach your eyes, the kind women master by the time they've been dismissed one too many times. "Not a speech," I said. "Just some words Dad wanted to be heard." I didn't wait for permission. I opened the letter and started reading. At first, it was quiet the way it gets during a toast, that shallow hush where people still expect to be entertained. The letter began as I remembered it, blunt, jarring, unapologetic in tone, but full of truths no one else had ever heard from him. I read it slowly, letting each word take up space. My father's voice echoed in the room through my own mouth, and it felt like conjuring a ghost with every sentence. I failed as a father more than I succeeded, it read. I didn't know how to show love. I thought distance was strength, that silence was dignity. I was wrong. Someone gasped to my mother, I think. I didn't look up. He talked about the mistake of favoring one child over another, how easy it had been to love the reflection he saw in Kyle, and how hard it had been to face the daughter who kept challenging him, demanding to be seen for who she really was. He didn't say that, Kyle muttered, laughing under his breath like it would diffuse the weight of the words. There's no way he actually wrote that. But I kept going. He wore a mask for years, I read, and so did you, Kyle. I see that now. The charm, the manipulation, the lies, it was all easier to let slide when you were young. But you grew into that mask, and now I don't know if you can even take it off. The tension in the room was so thick you could taste it, sour and metallic. Kyle looked around, his smile stiffening, his knuckles white against the stem of his wine glass. Then I hit the line that changed everything. And if Kyle is reading this now, it means he took the watch. He always did like taking what wasn't his. Aunt Claire nearly dropped her fork. My cousin James straightened in his chair like someone just punched him in the gut. Kyle's face flushed deep red, and for a second, he looked like a man who'd been caught shoplifting on a security camera he didn't know existed. That's fake, he said, rising from his chair so fast it scraped against the floor. You forged that. You seriously expect us to believe Dad wrote that? Give me a break. I folded the letter gently, as if it wasn't burning at the edges with every eye on it. Then I looked straight at him, calm and clear. Then you won't mind if we compare the handwriting to the one in your college applications folder, I said. You know, the one Dad kept hidden in the same box. His mouth opened, then closed. No sound. Just that tight little tick in his jaw he's had since high school, the one he gets when he's cornered and knows he can't lie his way out. And just like that, the room was no longer his. Not with those eyes on him. Not with Dad's words ringing in the air like church bells no one could unhear. For a full 10 seconds after I spoke, the room didn't move. It was like someone had pressed pause on reality, and every glass, every fork, every person froze in place like some twisted family portrait caught mid-breath. Kyle's mouth hung open, half-formed words dangling in the air like smoke that couldn't quite take shape, and his hands twitched at his sides like he couldn't decide whether to throw the wine glass or throw up. I just stood there, letter folded, eyes locked on him like I'd been waiting my whole life for that exact moment, because, in a way, I had. And Claire was the first to break the silence, her voice hushed like she didn't want to be heard, but couldn't stop herself either. Your father kept your college applications, she said, mostly to herself, like trying to piece together a puzzle she hadn't realized was missing a piece. Then came James, my cousin, who'd always been neutral to the point of being boring, suddenly asking the room, wait, why would he do that unless he knew something? And that's when the room cracked. Like glass under pressure, it didn't shatter all at once, it spiderwebbed. Little lines of doubt and disbelief, old resentments rising from where they'd been buried under years of forced smiles and polite avoidance. Some people turned their heads toward Kyle, others looked down at their plates like maybe if they stared hard enough, this would all disappear. Kyle's wife let out a short, panicked laugh that sounded like a balloon losing air in slow motion. She's lying, Kyle snapped, finally finding his voice, though it came out tight and strained. You all know what she's like. She's been holding a grudge against me since we were kids. This is what she does. And that's when I knew I had to finish it. Not just to shut him up, but to make it clear that this wasn't about bitterness or jealousy or whatever excuse he'd cooked up in that shiny little head of his. This was about the truth. It always had been. There's more, I said, voice steady, loud enough to rise over the tension building like a pot on the edge of boil. The letter wasn't the only thing in the deposit box. There were others, 5, actually, plus 3 journals. And 2 cassette tapes. Now every pair of eyes in the room snapped to me, and for the first time since Dad died, I didn't shrink under them. I stood taller, stronger. Dad recorded himself, I said, talking about the family, about decisions he made, about regrets, and yes, about Kyle. The color drained from Kyle's face so fast it was like watching a balloon deflate in reverse. His jaw clenched, his eyes darted from person to person, looking for someone, anyone, to jump in and defend him. But no one did. Not this time. I haven't played the tapes yet, I said. But I'm planning to. Anyone who wants to listen is welcome. He shook his head, voice rising in that panicked pitch only liars get when the room stops clapping. You're bluffing, he said. There's no tapes. This is just another stunt. You're trying to drag me down because you can't stand that Dad liked me more. And maybe that was true once. Maybe I couldn't stand how easily he fit into the space I was never allowed to occupy. But now? Now I didn't care who Dad liked more. Because the truth didn't need to be liked, it just needed to be heard. I reached into my bag again, slower this time, and pulled out the small black cassette labeled in Dad's blocky handwriting, Tape 1, January. I held it up like a trophy, letting everyone get a good look. The room went silent again, but not the same silence as before. This was heavier, more permanent. That's fake, Kyle said again, but this time his voice cracked right down the middle. Then I guess we'll find out together, I said. There wasn't much left to say after that. Conversations resumed in strange, fragmented spurts, people whispering, asking each other if they'd known, if they remembered this, or that detail from years ago that now seemed to carry a different meaning. A few of the family members, Claire, James, even our cousin Lila, who hadn't said a word all night, came over to ask if I was okay, if I needed help going through the tapes, if I planned to make copies. Kyle, meanwhile, stood in the kitchen doorway, pale and small in a way I had never seen before. And then I made the final move. The money, I said, loud enough for everyone still in the dining room to hear. What little is left, it's being donated to the Veterans Literacy Foundation Dad used to volunteer with. The paperwork is already filed. That one hit him like a punch to the ribs. You can't do that, Kyle said, stepping forward. You don't have that kind of authority. I smiled again, calmly this time, like someone who knows the check already cleared. Dad made me executor. You never asked. You just assumed. His mouth opened again, but no words came out. He left about 15 minutes later, slamming the front door behind him hard enough to rattle the picture frames in the hallway. I watched from the window, arms crossed, the bitter taste of pecan pie still clinging to the back of my throat. His car was parked across the street under the glow of the streetlight, and as he stepped into it, I caught one last glimpse of that watch flashing on his wrist like it was mocking me. Or maybe mocking him. I didn't move. Not until his taillights disappeared. Then I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the other envelope, the one I hadn't told anyone about, not even Mark. It was smaller, sealed tightly, and it had no label. Just my name and Dad's familiar scrawl. I stared at it for a while, heart pounding quietly in my ears. He wrote me too.